Every NFL team needs their fan base to have a little bit of faith in what they're doing, but unfortunately there are a number of teams where their fan bases are starting to lose a little bit of faith. So in today's video, I want to talk about the top 5 teams in the NFL where the fan bases are beginning to lose their faith. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the top 5 teams in which fan bases are losing their faith. That's not to say that every single member of that fan base has lost faith in their teams, but at the end of the day, I would say that there is a large majority of these fans that feel as if the front office and the head coaches don't really know what they're doing. So with that being said, let's hop into the list. Starting off at number 5, we're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Browns for basically the entirety of my life have been this fan base that has just had no faith in what the front office was doing, but that all kind of switched within the past couple years. You see, once they drafted Baker Mayfield, they seemed like they were actually kind of trending in the right direction. They had this young, talented quarterback, this young, talented roster, and they were able to bring in some veterans like Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. But of course, we all kind of know how that story ended up going. And then they moved off of Baker Mayfield and decided to go and make a big trade for Deshaun Watson, which reignited the fan base and got them all excited. But unfortunately, since that trade, it has kind of turned out to be one of the worst trades in recent history. Deshaun Watson, one on the field, has been okay at best, but primarily has just been struggling to stay on the field. Deshaun Watson has struggled with injuries, and when he's on the field, the performance has been extremely lackluster. And while this Browns team is as talented as can be in the NFL, I do feel as if there is a big time ceiling on this team. The team can easily make the playoffs, but they'll probably be out in the first 2 rounds. They really don't have a Super Bowl upside. To be honest with you, the only way that I can see this Browns team actually making that big jump to a Super Bowl is if somehow, some way, Deshaun Watson returns back to the normal form we've seen him before. But I don't really think that's ever going to happen, and I think a lot of Browns fans are starting to jump on that same train of thought as well. So while I do feel as if the majority of Browns fans are just totally fine at this point with being good enough to make the playoffs, because at the end of the day, it's been a long time since they've been at least that, but I would also say there's a good subsection of fans that also feel as if this team has sort of reached its potential and that they're just kind of just stuck in mediocrity at this point. I wouldn't necessarily be too upset if I was a Browns fan, because at the end of the day, it could be a lot worse, but at the same time, you have a talented enough roster where maybe you could win a championship. It's just that the quarterback position has continued to make this extremely difficult. Coming in at number 4, we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills are a little bit lower on this list just simply because of Josh Allen. I think 100% of the fans who are Buffalo Bills fans have 100% confidence in Josh Allen, in which they should, because Josh Allen has been an MVP-like quarterback ever since his 3rd year in the NFL. He's turned into a top 5 quarterback, and I do think he's the 2nd best quarterback in the league, and I think as long as you have that guy, you're always going to give yourself a chance. But truth be told, their best chance to win a championship, in my opinion, has sort of passed them. That's not to say that the Buffalo Bills have no chance of winning a championship with Josh Allen, because they're going to have plenty more opportunities to do so, but I feel as if after he got that big time contract and after the losses of a lot of major players, and of course after the massive Von Miller contract, it's become exponentially difficult for a guy like Josh Allen to win a championship. The roster isn't totally bad. In fact, I think there's some hidden gems on this team, and I do think they're going to be extremely competitive this upcoming season, but as I've mentioned, I think their glory days of being Super Bowl contenders seriously are kind of over with, and I think that's sort of the sentiment that I have been kind of getting from a lot of Buffalo Bills fans. There's a lot of faith in the team to be good next year, but I don't think anyone's really clamoring them to be Super Bowl contenders, because yes, you have Josh Allen, who is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, but the roster around him just realistically is not good enough. Now again, I could easily be wrong and this team could easily go out there and win a championship next year, and honestly, I'd be extremely happy for them. But I just feel as if the fan base is starting to somewhat lose faith in this team because they've sort of seen what the best they can get from them is. You had this roster just 2 years ago that was going toe-to-toe with the Kansas City Chiefs. It just came up one play short that really wasn't their fault. And really, ever since these playoff games with the Chiefs, it's been extremely difficult to sort of cope with the idea that they're just not better than them. Because at the end of the day, those games could have gone either way, but it just has not gone the way of the Buffalo Bills, and at the end of the day, I think you just kind of have to say that they're a better team. And unless somehow, some way you can get into a playoff series where you're not going up against the Chiefs, which is extremely unlikely, then I think that this team has somewhat reached its potential and that it's basically done for. Again, that's not to say that Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills can't win a championship. They have a bunch of talent, and I really do believe in Josh Allen. But I think the fan base in general has sort of come to the consensus that it's not going to be their year this year, and for the foreseeable future, it's going to look a little bit dark unless a guy like Keon Coleman can really break out. Coming in at number 3, we're going to be talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Jaguars had one extremely dominant year within the AFC South where they are clearly the best team in that division. And since that playoff loss where they lost in the second round, this team just doesn't quite look the same. Now, I will say that was just a couple years ago, so they can easily return back to form. But at the end of the day, the Jacksonville Jaguars now have a bunch of more competition within their own division. You see, when the Jaguars won their division, the Titans sucked, the Houston Texans sucked, and the Colts sucked. But now all 3 of those teams have their franchise quarterbacks and seemingly their franchise head coaches, and it does appear like all 3 of these teams are starting to trend in the right direction. And if you look at the Houston Texans and, in my opinion, the Indianapolis Colts, I think those 2 teams are clearly better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. So even if the Jaguars are somehow able to kind of turn things around and have a bounce back season next year, I don't think they're going to beat the Texans nor the Colts. And so you're probably going to come either 2nd or 3rd place in your division, which is a fall from grace from where you once were. And I think that's sort of the sentiment within the fan base. The fan base still believes in the team. Like, I feel like most people believe that this team is going to be good next year. But when it comes down to your pecking order of this division, I feel like Jaguars fans can sort of humble themselves and be like, yeah, we're probably not the best team in this division anymore. Because again, you look at the likes of the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts that have 2, in my opinion, star quarterbacks and star head coaches, and all of a sudden you're dropping down the pecking order really fast. And when you look into their outlook into 2024, if they don't make the playoffs, like, I don't really know where this team is going to head, because there is talent on this team and you just paid Trevor Lawrence, but at the end of the day, it does feel like you're sort of handicapping yourself by putting your team in a situation with this Trevor Lawrence contract and with the Doug Peterson situation. So at the end of the day, I think there is a good subsection of this fan base that is sort of telling themselves like, hey, we have to make the playoffs now and we have to make a run for it while we still can, because if Trevor Lawrence is not going to live up to this contract, then it's going to look as one of the worst contracts in the league. Again, I want to reiterate that I do believe in Trevor Lawrence and I do believe in this Jaguars team, but at the end of the day, I do feel as if this fan base is starting to lose a little bit of faith and confidence within their franchise. Coming in at number 2, we're going to be talking about the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants have been sort of at a free fall ever since they drafted Daniel Jones, because at the time the pick was seemingly a horrible pick, and for the first couple years of their selection it was looking like a horrible pick, and then all of a sudden in 2022 they had this awesome season where Daniel Jones was at least serviceable. And then we all know how it went. 2023 was probably one of their most disappointing seasons in franchise history, and now all of a sudden they're kind of hitting a small reset button by getting rid of a couple key players like Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley, and now they're kind of going 10 toes down on Daniel Jones to see if he's actually the future quarterback for this team. And I think the reason why the fan base is starting to lose faith within their management is because of some of the recent clips that have been surfacing on the internet. There have been some recent clips from, I do believe, their Hard Knocks thing, which don't quote me on that, I haven't seen it yet, but I believe it's from the Hard Knocks stuff, where they're basically comparing Daniel Jones to Patrick Mahomes by saying Patrick Mahomes couldn't be able to show his ability if he handed the ball off 20 times a game, which is just a ridiculous claim to make. Now again, I would be shocked if the Giants actually believe in Daniel Jones to the same extent that they do believe in a guy like Patrick Mahomes. But I think with all the clips surfacing about their negotiations and their thought process behind the Saquon deal, I feel like a lot of fans are a little bit frustrated and just extremely confused with their thought process behind it. Saquon Barkley has been their entire offensive system. He is the scheme, he is the guy, and now all of a sudden you're going into a season where Daniel Jones has to be the guy, and let's just be honest, that's not going to happen. I feel like the fan base has no confidence in Daniel Jones, and yes, they're extremely excited about some of the younger players like a Malik Neighbors, but I think every Giants fan will tell you that their ceiling is extremely limited with Daniel Jones at the helm. So for Giants fans, as long as Daniel Jones is there, I just have to be honest with you, your team is kind of screwed. I like Brian Daboll and I like a couple of the pieces on this team, but there are a lot of issues that have to be addressed with this team, and it does start off with that quarterback position. So when you look at the fan base, there is a part of the fan base that is like, hey, you know what, we're gonna suck, but at least we have Malik Neighbors, which is gonna be awesome to watch. But then you have another part of the fan base that's like, yeah, there's nothing good going for this team, and sure, we have some young pieces, but it's Daniel Jones who's still going to stop us. And to me, that screams a lack of faith within the front office and a lack of faith within your starting quarterback. But coming in at number 1 is going to be, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Dallas Cowboys are probably the most interesting team on this list because they're more than likely going to be pretty good next year, and they've been pretty good the past couple seasons. But unlike the Bills and the Browns, I think the expectation for the Dallas Cowboys has gotten significantly lower than those teams. Like, Cowboys fans are genuinely concerned that they're not even going to be making the playoffs this year because of how bad their offseason was. Now, I'm not here to tell you guys whether or not you should be worried about the Dallas Cowboys and whether or not they had a bad offseason, because quite frankly, I think they had an offseason that was kind of needed in some way. But I think the majority of the fans are just extremely disappointed with Jerry Jones. And I think a big portion of fans are extremely disappointed in Jerry Jones because of the fact that he said that the Cowboys were going all in and then proceeded to do absolutely nothing. Again, for me, I kind of view this as an offseason that was somewhat needed because of all the massive contracts they have to hand out. But at the end of the day, you have CeeDee Lamb, who potentially might be requesting a trade, which would be a massive loss for the Dallas Cowboys because he's a top 5 wide receiver. And they still haven't paid the likes of Dak Prescott or Micah Parsons or the aforementioned CeeDee Lamb. So quite literally, the Dallas Cowboys have done nothing this offseason besides have a draft class and bring in a guy like Eric Kendricks, and they're kind of going all in next year with this group once again. And I don't know if the mindset for the Cowboys is to say this is going to be a prove-it year for all of our major guys, when that quite doesn't make much sense because Dak Prescott has proven to be a top 10 quarterback, CeeDee Lamb has proven to be a top 5 wide receiver, and Micah Parsons is probably the second or third best defensive lineman in the league. So if I'm Jerry Jones, my thought process would be, how can I keep these guys for the long haul? Not can these guys prove themselves to me one more time, because they've proven themselves throughout their entirety of their career. If I was the Cowboys, I'd pay these guys, and if I was a Cowboys fan, I would be extremely worried about what this team is doing long term, because it does appear as if they're not going to commit to any of these big time contracts. And I think the majority of the fan base has sort of come to the sentiment that, hey, this team probably can't win a championship unless Jerry Jones somehow just steps down or just does his job properly. And because this fan base has been clamoring for some change for quite some time, I don't think it's going to happen this year, and I don't think it's going to happen in the next couple of years, but hey, we'll have to wait and see. But if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and if I missed any teams, let me know in the comment section below. But I appreciate you guys watching, and I love you guys. Peace.